All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Lunch and Learn. I am Jeremy, one of the trainers here. Happy to help and assist in whatever ways we can today. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them up in the Q&A, and I'll be happy to get to them as we talk about different things today. And while I give everyone a time to join in and type in any questions they may have, I'll kind of go ahead and point out some of the usual things and places to check out that we usually point out in the beginning of these, in case you're not aware. So a couple things. We have our YouTube channel. Feel free to check that out. Like, subscribe, all those usual YouTube plugs that people put in nowadays, but definitely a great place if you have any curiosities about different things, concepts, and decisions. We're constantly trying to add new content, videos about specific steps, videos about other different materials. Recent things that we put up there, like a bunch of good information about rule sets and some different use case examples for them and stuff like that. So definitely check the YouTube out because there's a lot of good stuff on there. We got the Decisions Solutions Marketplace, great place for looking at different applications that you can install in Decisions. You can access it, the apps and things in your Decisions instance, but you can also look at the marketplace through our website or through this QR code. Check those things out as well. It's still relatively new, but just in case anyone's not aware, we do actually have our DocBot AI accessible in the support chat. So if you're in the middle of decisions working on something and you have questions, you can actually type it in there and the AI will hopefully be able to help you and a little bit if needed as well. So a lot of pretty cool things. Definitely check those out. And we do a lot of other training specific items such as our stand-ups and our afternoon stand-up that'll happen in a couple hours this afternoon as well if you're working on any specific training projects and things. That's a great place to get some help with that as well. But otherwise, you can go ahead and turn to any questions. So again, if you do have any questions, please post them in the Q&A and I'll be happy to take a look. And we do have a question in the chat now. So, Leah Turner, go ahead if you want to further, but I'll read your question at least out loud. But you have the ability to talk to expand if you have anything else. So the question is, I'm curious about case configurations and case management. When would this be used versus a regular flow? And how do you have any clients that use this functionality now? If so, can you give some high-level examples of their use cases? So are you referring to like the data type case entity or something, or is there something else you're looking more for?
There are, I think the videos I've watched, it's called case management, and it looks like a little screen where you can like trigger maybe different flows from the same screen. Let's see. Let me see if I can find on the website the video. Yeah, like that right there.
This? Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, what you're referring to then, it's a type of data structure that you can create in decisions. So among the various different data types, it's called a case entity. So this is among the more powerful data types in decisions. If you get used to the different types of data types that we have available, if I can pull that up super quick. Data structures, differences between data structures. So on this difference between data structures document we have, it kind of shows the power of a lot of the different data structures we have, and case entities is the most powerful one, just because it has a lot of the things that most of the earlier ones do with like database writing and things like that. But the key that the visual that you're talking about is the configuration folder. It has a lot of power within that. It has folder behavior, so you can hold things inside case entities. And then you can also it has process tracking, so you can provide states to these items and like actually track that process. Some people even will use these with our process mining feature as well. But yeah, so case entities, nothing fancy beyond the normal create your typical data structure concept here. But they do have a prefix and a length that you can provide. So then when you're building your case entities, it'll add like little IDs to help track the cases as each one gets created. So when you're building up your processes and you're adding new items to some case, you can see those values in there. Um, and then it'll create a configuration folder that goes along with that data type. And the configuration folder has a lot more new things that you can add to it as well. The actions you'll see up here, you can add pages that are specific to this configuration folder. There's different types of actions you can do. So you can use that to add like right clickable actions. So if someone right clicks something, they can, right clicks an entity or something, they can right click it and they'll see a new action that you can configure for yourself, different things like that. Um, and so here's actually an example. This is one of our training projects called the Financial Lending Project that we use and we use this case entity to demonstrate quite a few different functionalities of this. So this is one way that it can be used, but we use a lot of what's called trigger flows inside this one. And so when you're inside, you can add additional states. So we have a bunch of states where it follows a loan application process. So someone goes through it and it goes and it calculates their credit score and other values. Then it gets sent to a loan officer, and then that loan officer reviews it, sends it back to the person who requested it so that they can upload documents and so on and so forth. Um, but we run a lot of the processes through what's called a trigger flow. So trigger flows allow you to set up a special flow that whenever this state is reached, it'll trigger the corresponding flows that are attached to that state. So we have our main process will just go through and then it'll say, it'll automatically approve or deny them for like the initiating state. And if it approves them, it'll set the state to credit score calculation. And once the system notices that it reached this state, it'll trigger the scoring and evaluation flow. So it'll run that flow and go through the process and then allows it to go through all of the states that we have, as the process continues. So we use trigger flows pretty heavily in this. But you can also use user actions to, have a right clickable action. We have another training project that uses those, which is this insurance claim project. And the insurance claim project has a dashboard. Um, wait, what am I talking about? That's not the right one. Sorry, I'm getting my things mixed up. I-9 application is the one that I'm referring to. And there's a dashboard in this that has a lot of details on it. And then if you right click on the items in the dashboard, you'll actually have the actions that we've configured in here, such as an action that they can view their I-9 document or right click it to sign the document. So there's a lot of different actions and things you can add to it as well, as part of the functionality of a configuration folder. Other than that, you can add dashboards to this. So you have dashboards that are attached to the case entities. And then, all throughout this process with the states and everything that are required, we have our process mining function in decisions. So in the process mining function, you can actually track the process and how many times it's reached certain states and different things like that, which is a very, it's not quite the as common that I see for developers to track, but other people that understand business process modeling and stuff like that will want to be able to track the data. So if the developers use case entities, it's really easy to track the data through process mining, and that kind of thing. And that's where that process mining functionality, that last part, can be very useful in some cases as well. But other than that, it functions like a regular data structure where you add your fields and everything like that you would for a database structure or something. It creates a table in the database that all of your items get saved to. So if you have if I just open up the flow here, um, in my process, I have a create step that will create all the data. It takes in all the data from the forms, and then what this will do is it'll save that data um, to the database. So then all of this can be called. I can fetch it with fetch entities. I can, track all the data there. It's a folder, so the folder has the state, so we can track the state. So then whenever I set the state of that folder to some other value, it can easily track that, and that's how the trigger flows run. Um, so yeah, it's definitely pretty powerful. It's obviously on the more complex side since it's, on the far right of our list here. It's more complex. It has more, features and functionality to it. So it can definitely be more complex, but it's definitely a very powerful data structure to use. And again, that's just simply in creating your data types, you can create a case entity. Did that answer enough of your question, or were you looking for anything more I can add to that?
Oh, I think that answers the question. We're just looking at it to maybe do some automation of creating what we call authorizations in our system based on some other criteria. So we're just trying to
Hmm.
figure out if that would be a good use case for this.
Okay, yeah, sure. Um, I've got two other questions then in the chat. Since I'm already talking about case entities, I'll get to yours in a moment, Alexander. But Grant did ask a question related to this since I'm already in my case entity stuff. Is there ever a situation in a case entity structure where you would have a trigger flow and a user action at the same time? That's a good question. I don't know if I have any specific use cases that I personally have seen, Grant, but I'm sure that you could have some things where, there may be like this example I think is an example where it wouldn't make sense to necessarily do that because it's very linear. Like it's guaranteed to be it starts, then it goes to this state, then it goes to this state, then it goes to this state. But they don't have to be linear when you're building it like this. Like you could have your credit score, it displays as linear, but like, in the functionality wise, it doesn't have to be linear. So where it starts in this state and moves on to the next state, maybe sometimes credit score will head to loan officer review, but then with a different pathway in this flow, it'll go to application document upload instead. So something like that, like it doesn't have to be very linear or straightforward. It can kind of bounce between different states. So, and then if that's the case, then I think there's maybe a chance where you have something more likely to be if it's in a certain state, you can do some kind of have some kind of manual action or additional ability to move it along in a different way. Um, Providing a user action to say, hey, if it is in the loan officer review state, and I can actually have the loan officer automatically with an action send it directly to the underwriter review because maybe for whatever reason the loan officer has all the applicant's documents and they can review it right away when it's in this state. Then maybe I give the loan officers an action that allows them to send to the underwriter, right? So I can actually provide, additional steps to then, set the state. And I'm not going to go full on this, but I'll at least throw that there as a simple action and say, okay, if I take this, the folder ID, and I set the state to, I don't remember what the actual name of that state was called. I'll call it underwriter review for now. But I can just say, hey, if I have a special case where the loan officer has this information, I can add an action here. So if this loan officer wants to, they can right click it, send it to the underwriter, and now it'll just automatically set the state to the underwriter. And since this is a process that has an assignment in it, it may not have reached the end of it. So I can have it set to close that process, cancel this flow, and just automatically send it to a later state if I want to. So there's definitely some customization that you could do, in some cases, and I'm sure that you could make it work. It would just take maybe a little bit of thinking, but I think that's and a good example is if you want to add a manual process in addition to the triggers, that kind of thing. All right, awesome. All right, Alexander's question next. Your question is, how can I add a, oops, it disappeared on me. How can I add a comment box to my flows? I'll give you a chance to talk if you want to expand on that a little bit while I open up a flow here.
Sure. I just want to add a comment box to my flows so people that look at it know what's happening. I know we can comment on like the saves and stuff like that, but this is just kind of a quick way to what this part is doing right here, right?
Yeah,
So
so like if someone else that's not you opens this flow, they can say, oh, this step is supposed to be doing this, right? Like that kind of thing.
yeah, just like a box that I would like fill out, with information in different parts. Like if there's something
Yeah.
important that you may not like know why it's there and it looks a little weird because part of
Mhm.
my flow right now, I know that I fixed something earlier, but if you're just looking at it, you'd be like, why is it like this? And I kind of want to explain that. Because another flow basically later on catches it and looks if there's any errors. But anyway, It's
Sure.
just so people know
Yeah,
what's happening, even if
of
they're not
course.
very familiar with decisions.
Yeah. So, inside flows, there's actually a category, if you look at the list of step categories, called annotation. And in here, there's actually just a lot of like neat little things that you can add to just provide a little bit of details. So some of them are like images or even just like an arrow, if you want to have an arrow pointing to something to like note something, and this can attach to your steps and things if you want to. Um, but like that kind of thing, you can point that out. But then underneath this, and there's other shapes too, a lot of different like picture things. But then in addition to that, you've got rich text labels. So if you want, fully like the full customization of a rich text box, or even just simple labels here, and then you can just, provide that information and, place it wherever you want, have arrows point to it if you want to,
So this is
whatever that
under
is.
annotation, but is it actually like a step? Like, can I just search it
Nope.
up at the top or?
Oh, yes, you can search it. It's not
Okay,
it's not a step in that it like fits in your flow or anything. But yeah, you could easily search. I typically just type in label if I want to add a label, and you'll get all of your labels to pop up,
great.
large,
That's
medium,
exactly
small,
what
and
I
rich
wanted.
text. Yep, definitely a good idea. I think something that gets overlooked often. Definitely great though to help people from the outside see what's going on. So good thinking.
Great. Thank you.
Hmm. All right. We have another question. All right. I have a paginated GET API call whose output is JSON as shown below, and they provided JSON in the text. What steps do I need to use in a flow in order to show the table with the data populated from the JSON response? Okay. I give you the opportunity to talk if you have anything to expand on this.
Yeah, basically, I'm just wanting to use the appropriate steps, Jeremy. So
Hmm.
I'm not sure like what should I use, if I use get API endpoint, or do I need to create a REST service through integration step, or what would be the better way? And also, where should I output the data? So let's say if I get the output as string, I'll convert it to JSON, deserialize, and then, I have these options in the paging output, like, has previous and has next. So I want to use them and get the paginated data. Like, let's say I have 100, 200 records. I only want to show 25 at a time. And then when you click next, the next part of the next batch, next chunk should populate. So, and also, should I use page, report, or a form? I'm getting confused on that, like how the flow should be built in. What's the perfect steps that we need to take to?
Sure. Yeah. So a couple things that I can point out. I know if you have like you're expecting that JSON and how it's supposed to be detailing everything. If you don't have anything in decisions that's expecting or like uh planning to take in all the data specifically from that, we do have the ability to create a data type from that JSON if you need it. So you can easily just take that specific data, and if I put your JSON structure in here, give it a name and everything, you can actually save and create just a couple of flow structures automatically using that data. So if you have something, it's just going to be a flow structure, so it won't create like one of the more detailed, database structures where it's like saving to the database or anything. So if you want one of those, you'd have to create those separate from this. But what this does is it'll actually just create. Let me add a name real quick. It'll create that in your data structures or wherever you save it, and with all of those details underneath it. And then when you create them, you'll actually now have a data structure. See how it creates the base outside one as well as any substructures that would be underneath it, depending on how the JSON is built. So it creates these data values for you. And then from there, if you go and you create your integration, external services. Like if you create like a REST service, for example, that you want to take in for that data. I don't have it. Obviously don't have the specifics, but I'm just gonna type in a value here just so I can start the second part, right? When you add your method, with whatever method you have, you can actually choose how the data gets output. And if you do like raw value output for this service, right, it'll just output like the single string with all of the data in it. But if you have an actual data type that you've created, like I just did just now, where we created this test JSON example, I can actually make it get output directly as this type. So now whenever I make this call through this method to get all of my data, whatever, all of it will come out as this specific data type. So then when I call this, and it'll go through and I'll get all the specific information with, your page, current page, total page, page size, all that stuff that's underneath that value here. Since it was created for me with this create with JSON data structure, I'll get that information automatically. And then, then I have that. Now, obviously this isn't going to work because I don't have the actual place to call directly to get that, but hopefully that at least gets you the idea of how you can call it. And then by simply just placing this API method into a flow, now it'll just automatically call the API and get you that data for you with whatever, with the actual information in the data as opposed to just that,
So
just the plain
yeah,
JSON.
let's assume that we have 100 records, and I will pass the query parameters to my URL, say that page size is only 10. So it only gets 10 records first, but like when I get those 10 records and populate it in a table using either report or page dashboard, then how would I integrate those previous and next buttons, which should which should appear based on the values in the paging data structure, like has previous or has next, so when I click them, it should get me the next 10 records, and when I click previous, it should get me the previous 10 records, something like that.
Right. Okay. Not knowing the specifics enough, I think to do that, after that point, it'll start becoming something to build in like the page designer. I'm not 100% sure the best way to maybe build that part out. When you're building something in the page designer, right, you can pull from the reports and you can have those reports filter and display different values depending on what you need. So, you would have to look at those. You would need to have some kind of like report designer viewer in here, and then in this report to add the ability to look at the next or previous options. I think it would just be reading those values from the report, and then you'd probably have to send them through like a selection bus here into like which you would be able to see in the properties of these things in a lot of cases. That would be like getting the data from something. The specifics though, I don't know for sure. The best way. I'm not sure if Gregory, you know enough of what he's referring to right now to add on to what I'm saying.
Not 100% sure. Are you trying to fetch the results every time they click a page, or have all the results fetched already and then just be able to navigate between pages that have those results? I'm not sure we fully understand the ask.
Yeah, so right now we are still in the growing phase. So let's say we have only 100 records right now, but in future we'll be having thousands of records in the get API fetch call. So when you say fetch all the data at a time, don't you think that it will cause any performance issues in order to get that data and store it somewhere in the decisions part? we are trying to, I mean, I'm trying to think like if you fetch all the data at the same time, like thousands of records, and perform next and previous buttons with already existing data, then won't it affect the performance? And in order to stop that, we thought that, we have the paginated get API call already written in the backend. Why don't we use it and get only 10 or 25 records at once? And then when you click next, we will fire another get API call and then get the next 10 or 25 records. So is that feasible here using decisions?
Let's see. Not to show it as a report. I mean, yes, it can be done, but the idea of displaying something as a report is that those objects are database saved. It's not just transient flow data. There's other ways to display transient flow data, but having that not be database saved means that you don't have something that kicks off that fetch when it goes to the next page. You can prevent the report from loading all of the options at once. And you can also have a scheduled job that runs in the background to have those fetched items database saved and updated every once in a while so that the report shows the newest data. But there isn't a way in a report viewer on a page to force a fetch by clicking a next or previous button. There may be other ways to display that, but not specifically in that way. So if you're trying to limit performance impacts, what would seem to be making the most sense is to have some sort of scheduled job that updates a table every once in a while with those records or before a flow run or something like that. So you would have all of the records that get fetched, and you can even have a flow that runs as soon as someone opens the page that fetches new records there, and then only load the records that are on each page being displayed to the user. So the records are database saved. There's no call being made while the user is viewing the report, which is even less performance than trying to make a call for every 10 records. Or sorry, yeah, less performance impacting than making a call every 10 records. And then you just have it stored on the database side for any new records that get created. Does that make
Basically,
some
yes.
sense?
Yeah, so basically you're saying that we will create a database here in decisions to store the data first and then play with it.
I would recommend. I can't say I would recommend that because I don't know your full process. Like I don't have access to your environment and all the use cases, so I cannot say one way or another if that is the ideal path without going and looking at your project. But that would be an approach to trying to do what you're doing without it taking forever to load the pages and pages of records that you would be using.
Okay. So the basically the scope of the project that we are building is like, once you get that data, we will perform some editing options on that existing data, and we'll also call other post API calls whenever you edit that data, add or delete or something in that records, and then play with that table. So
Or you can just integrate it
yeah.
directly. If you're trying to get data from your external database or report, you can just have that be a report view and paginate it so that it's not loading all the records that exist from that call at once.
Next meeting times for the customers.
Mm.
Yeah. This is something I would open a support ticket for this, and the reason why is because they are allowed to go in your environment, take a look at what you're trying to do, and then work with you on that, knowing all the context. Whereas us here on Lunch and Learn, we can only gain so much, right?
Okay. Yeah. Where can I create that ticket?
Oh, I'll show you here. It's very simple. Let me pull up the chat real quick, and I'm going to put this to everyone. All you do is send an email to support@decisions.com. That creates the ticket for them automatically, and they will reach out to you.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
that
would
sounds
recommend
good.
that just for some more context here. But that is an approach. You could integrate with a database view if you're trying to fetch this into a different database. If it's a JSON call to some sort of external API service, the only way that you have permanence in that data is by saving it to some sort of database, whether that's on your side or the one that Decisions is installed against.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the only other way is to create it somewhere, right? Decisions lives on top of a database. You bring in that data, it only passes through and it goes away unless you actively save it somewhere. And all of the JSON structures that get automatically created are created as you saw, flow structure data, which means they do not get saved automatically when those fetches occur. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, but it just means that you have to set up that saving process with that data.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean the the main motto was to use decisions as a UI and then make it interact with the backend API calls that we have and then show the data appropriately and for the end user. So that's what we thought of using decisions platform. But from what you say, I, I,
I'm not saying you can't
yeah,
do it that way. I'm saying that if you're looking for the most performant way to do it,
right.
then having it saved database wise would make more sense. Yeah, you can make those calls. You can have a next button that would actively call that, populate it with a form of advanced data grid, and then not show the other results. The API would need to be configured to only take the next 10 results, so it would have to recognize what's been fetched and what to fetch again. But you absolutely can do that on a page and with an advanced data grid. That's not a report viewer, though. That's what I want to make clear. It's not a report viewer. It'd be an advanced data grid that you're looking for if you want to display it that way and accomplish what you're looking for. You can do it that way. You can make your own button. It's just not the default button on the report viewer that does that.
Got it.
Yep. You would have like a run flow button or something like that. That flow would make the API call, populate the data grid, and then refresh it to display the results to the user. And the reason I say advanced data grid is because the report viewer fetches data that is some sort of database saved or like it's a query, a view, something like that, right? So that's the point of the report viewer. You need a different kind of viewer to show that data, but you can do it.
Okay.
And we have those kind of viewers. It's not like a JavaScript. This does exist in Decisions already. Uh, Jeremy, can you go to Pages real quick?
Yep.
Yeah, let's is that the example page for him? Oh no, that was made a
No,
while
that's
ago.
just an old one that I had. Do
All
you want me to
right.
make a new one?
Yes, please. Okay, so at the very least, you're gonna have access to a advanced data grid on a form tile, and you can display it here. Or there might be one in the page. I'm trying to remember if there's one directly, or if you have to do it via form tile. Advanced.
Oh,
Let's see. Okay, I don't see it here. That's okay. So what you would do is you'd have something like a form tile. That form tile would be able to display a form that has an advanced data grid, and that data grid would get populated with data that you pass in from an API call that occurs by clicking a button on this page, your next button or your previous button, right?
Yeah.
So this has an advanced data grid on it. This has a very particular kind of structure, and that structure is probably going to be similar, if not equal to the JSON structure that you create. But this displays information passed in dynamically. We're not going to configure this right now because that's just going to take a little bit to set up. But that would be your outline, right? And let's exit and save this. And then on this form tile, you're going to see, I think it's under behavior, or is it settings? I don't remember. Keep going. Where is it?
I'm at the bottom.
Is it at the bottom? Base part type? What's part type? Base content? No, that's not it. Scroll up a little bit. Where is this? Refresh on form change initially enabled input form tiles. Keep scrolling down. Huh. I'm not seeing on this control, but there is the control. I'll have to check what that is specifically. But the idea is that you have a flow that passes in information to this form tile, and that information will come from your fetch, right? So you'll have just a run flow button. That'll be a next button basically, and that flow is what's going to perform your API call and then pass the data into that form to be displayed to the user that contains the advanced data grid. So that's a setup that could accomplish what you're looking for. Again, not saying it's the most performant, but this is an option. Does that make some sense?
So that is the next button. So if I want a previous button, how would I do?
Same thing, right? Next button, previous button, exact same logic, right? The only difference is whatever logic you have set up in the API call that you're going to make in the forms itself. So one of these will run a flow that will fetch the API data for the next 10 results, and one will run a flow that fetches the API data for the previous 10 results.
So when you say flow, I need to create a flow which will have the get API call, and that will get the data, right?
That's right. It passes out the data, and then you set the data into the input for the form tile, or maybe it's a, I don't know why it's not showing on the form tile. It should be like something like that. There should be an input. We can double check on our end exactly what that is. It's not under behavior. There's nothing under. Weird. Maybe I'm mixing up the controls. But the idea is that you're displaying your form here, and that will get updated with what you pass into it from that flow to the form. Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. I'll have to double check that and figure that out. It's
Yeah, I
not
know what you're talking about. I can't remember it either.
Yeah. But yeah, that would be kind of a design paradigm for that. If you want more specifics on that, I would reach out to support
Okay.
again, because they can take a look at your exact process.
Got it.
But yeah, that's the general outline of how to accomplish what you're trying to do.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Cool beans.
All right. That was all the questions we had queued up in the Q&A. So, anyone else have any additional questions? Anything else they'd like to ask? Speak now or hold your peace until at least tomorrow. All right. Well, if we got nothing else, then we can go ahead and end early today. As a reminder, check out some of these cool things we have. Our YouTube channel, here's Marketplace, where you can check out a lot of cool applications and things that you could install into your decisions instance just to check out, maybe give some inspiration or actually try out and use. So there's a lot of cool things there. So if you have any of those kinds of questions or anything you're curious about, let me know. Let us know, and we'll be happy to do that. I don't know why this is loading for me. But that will conclude our lunch and learn for today. We got one more this week with tomorrow. Looks like Jared will be leading it. So join back tomorrow, come with some questions or come to observe, and we'll see you all next time. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.